I'm Rose, and joining me today is Nancy Colier, psychotherapist and author. Today she's going to talk about her latest book, The Power of Off, the mindful way to stay sane in a virtual world. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi.
Lovely to have you. So tell me, you admit to being addicted to technology. That's one of the reasons why you wrote the book. Can you give us a sense of what that addiction was like for you before you transformed?
Well, I was addicted to email, to checking email. And, you know, it wasn't like I was expecting anything from Obama. Nothing amazing was coming in. But I was checking, you know, every, I don't know, 15 minutes. And one time I walked by my children at the end of a long day, walked straight to my email, and started opening it. And I had checked, you know, 15 minutes on the way home, and it wasn't necessary. And I woke up in that moment, and I realized, how am I living? What am I doing here? Is the way I'm spending my time honoring what's valuable to me? And it wasn't horrible to be addicted. I mean, it was no big deal to be checking. But what I was neglecting in my life, where I was attending, didn't line up with my values. So I took a very, very hard look there to say, okay, I have to make some choices here and take control of my behavior.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I find that I spend a lot of useless or valuable time, not useless, valuable time checking emails as well, and I get absorbed in, you know, going through them and making sure that my little indicator doesn't say, you know, 100 emails. Like, I have to get that number down.
Right, right.
So I waste time. Yes, it's an obsession. So how can I stop?
Well, you know, we stop when we really start to look at it very consciously. You know, I was also using technology. If I had any free time, which it sounds maybe similar, I would fill it, right? I would learn something, or I would online shop, or any gaps, any spaces between things to pay attention to, I would just fill it up. And it was entertaining and it was interesting. But again, I started to look more consciously at what am I really doing with my technology use? Am I okay with it? I had fallen, as most of us do, into kind of a hole where we're not really using consciously, right? So what do? First you wake up and you say, the way I'm living, something is not okay with me about this. Even you're bringing that question, you know, why am I spending time knocking down the number? I just used an hour of my life. At the end of my life, am I going to be pleased that so much of it went into, you know,
answering emails, and that's unproductive time, and I've accomplished nothing.
Exactly. So it begins really with acknowledging something is not okay with this. And then from there, you know, there are all sorts of strategies in the book and things we can talk about as we go on about how do you then turn that into practically living differently. But the biggest one, I would say, is the acknowledgement, I have to take ownership of the way I am relating with technology, right? Because again, technology is not doing this to us. Technology is inanimate. The way human beings are using technology and how we're allowing ourselves to kind of fall down the rabbit hole, it's up to us to take ownership of it.
Right. No, absolutely. You say that our society has an addiction to technology, similar to food, alcohol, sex, drugs. Tell me a little bit more about the addiction. What happens in that? What's the process?
Well, the markers of addiction, right, to name just a few, that our use is increasing, that we are giving up activities that used to bring us joy or nourish us and replacing them with our substance, that we are sneaking using. I have a friend, she goes into bathroom stalls to check, to tweet, to do all these sorts of things, that we're having withdrawal symptoms when we try and cut down. Agitation, irritation, depression. Most people feel these when they try and get it. You ever see somebody who doesn't have their charger and who's out of juice? I mean, they look like somebody who, you know, lost their EpiPen. We want to quit. We want to not quit, but we want to cut down. We can't. We don't. We won't. Right? We continue using even though we know that it's harming some aspect of our life, our health, our sleep, our social relationships, our work relationships. We're aware and we keep using. All of these are markers of addiction. We have all of them. And similar to like an eating disorder, more than an alcohol problem, we have to learn to find freedom in technology, not from technology. We have to find a relationship.
Right.
There's, you know, if you give up alcohol, you can stop hanging out with your buddies at the bar. Who are we going to hang out with if we're cutting down? So the only difference between this addiction and any other addiction is that we've all drunk the Kool-Aid.
Right.
We're all in.
We are all guilty of it.
Yeah.
But tell me what goes on in the brain.
Yeah.
What's that process of addiction that I think our audience will benefit from knowing?
Right. So technology, like all addictions, hits the reward center in our brain. And dopamine is released, oxytocin is released, all these yummy, yummy hormones that make you feel high.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. So it's real. You know, when you go online, that moment you open your laptop and you know 15 minutes, you know, of distraction, I'm in, that kind of little bit of a high you feel, it's real. Something is happening inside the brain. So again, you know, this is not about shaming people. We are falling, you know, victim to some degree or into the hands of our reptilian nature. We have, all of us, a kind of higher self, a self that can be discerning and say, hey, what's really important to me? How am I living by that, or am I not? Am I present? Am I conscious? And then we have a kind of reptilian nature that just loves immediate gratification. It loves distraction. It loves pleasure. And so, you know, we have to really kind of wrestle back our relationship with technology from our inner reptile.
What are one of the symptoms that someone's addicted?
50% of millennials would rather give up their sense of smell than their phone. 1 in 3 people, grown-ups, older people, young people, all together would rather give up sex. 1 in 3 people than their phone. 90% of millennials sleep with their phone. A child that's born in 2013, by the age of 7, will have spent a year of his life in front of a screen.
Wow. A lot of time.
Yeah, these are some really, an average person checks their phone 180 times a day. So these are good signs of addiction, right? But if you're noticing that something in you is saying, I need to cut down,
Check
or
your phone. Check your phone. Check your phone.
That's addiction.
Yeah.
That's addiction.
I'm
So
addicted.
again, though,
I hear the voice all the time.
Yeah, we all do. What's important is not so much that you hear it, but what you do with that voice or that thought. Because one of the parts of the detox is to start to notice how many times in a minute, in an hour, in a day, do I hear that thought? I could check, right? And to start to separate that thought from the behavior. So right now, because it's a bad habit, we've built some bad habits, we've collapsed the thought with the behavior. As soon as we have the thought, we're acting on it. The biggest piece, besides owning how do we really want to be with technology, is to start to separate the behavior from the thought. So I may still have that thought a number of times, oh, I could check. But now there is a conscious place that's saying, well, but do I want to make that choice to check? So we've got to separate those two.
Right.
And that's a big part of breaking an addiction.
Okay. I'm going to take my journal out and start journaling, making notes, because I notice it, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
But if we're not so afraid, like with any addiction or any thought, you know, the basics of mindfulness are that we start to see our thoughts before acting on them. So the fact that the thought comes up stops being such a big deal. We've sort of built that habit, and the less that we pay attention and honor that thought, the more the thought sort of fades away. It's kind of, you know, if it doesn't get our attention, or we don't heed it, or do what it says, essentially, it sort of just kind of, it goes away. I mean, what's fascinating to me in some ways that mindfulness is such a buzz right now. It's such the rage, and yet if you really look at the way we're living the antithesis of mindfulness. We are either staring literally at something which is taking us out of the present moment. We're not, biting into that peach. We're not looking into our child's eyes. We're not feeling the wind on our back. We're actually not where we are. And if we're not stepping out of life that way, we're walking, we're at the museum taking selfies of ourselves looking at art so that we can show that we're a cultural person, right? We're not actually looking at the art. We're looking for places that our selfie will prove who we are.
Yeah.
Right? And, honestly, if we're not doing that, we're at our child's dance recital videoing it, not experiencing it, but videoing it so later we can show people, look what a life I'm living. But all the cost for all of our, 64 gigabytes of memory in our iPhoto file is life itself.
Yeah.
Is showing up.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because I find myself, when my children are playing sports, and I hit that button, I notice, and I said to myself, I don't want to watch them through this lens. I want to see them outside of the lens. So then I stopped filming.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, because otherwise you're watching the whole game through this tiny little lens.
That's right. And most people are not even watching it through. They're tinkering. They're getting the filter right. They're not even seeing it. And what's amazing is that we're losing the trust that if we show up for that recital or that sport or whatever it is, that experience will go somewhere in us, right? We've begun to believe that if we don't have it, in a concrete form, we don't have it. But we have it in ourselves. That's what memory is. That's what this body holds. And it's fascinating to me because I watch people, they'll have an experience, say they're walking on the street and a woman has a stroller and they'll go to open the door, that sort of very sweet moment where you just help someone on the street. And in previous times, we might have walked the rest of that block just processing that. Owning that experience, taking it in. What does it mean to me? Now, we're right there on Facebook, hashtag gratitude, hashtag kindness.
Help someone, yeah.
Right, check me out, right? And we've got a photo of the stroller, we're good to go. But what we've lost is we've lost the internalization of that experience.
And just enjoying that moment.
That's it. Yeah. And that processing that experience will change us. Fundamentally, having it on Facebook or in our iPhoto file is not going to change us.
Yeah. I hate social media. I do. Sorry, I do. I hate it. Hear me say it.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated.
It is.
It's complicated because if you even
time consuming.
It's
a job in itself.
Yep.
Now, you use the term twired. What does it feel like? What does it feel like to be twired?
You could probably answer that if you were honest. We can all answer it, is the truth. The combination of tired and wired, right? We're simultaneously exhausted. I think we're all that way right now. Exhausted and also amped up and kind of anxious, right? So when I see people in my office, this is now the collective state of affairs. This is the basic state of being, is so overwhelmed with the number of tasks, emails to return, just to keep our technology up and running, to understand it, to stay up to speed. We're so exhausted. And at the same time, though, we're kind of in this hyper state of on. People bring their phones into session now, and they leave them on. My television producers often put two on their each arm of the table, because God forbid we should miss a moment of something. Well, it's not just our devices that need to power off. We need to power off, and we're never not on anymore. So the power of off is not just about turning our smartphone off. It's turning our nervous system off. That has a very very strong effect on us, and that's what it feels like to be tired. It's kind of fun. We're kind of like on 8 cups of caffeine, but we're also wiped out. And we all know the feeling.
Yeah.
We're never not available. You know, the myth of technology is that it makes life easier, it makes it more connected, and it makes us freer, right? Well, what's starting to happen is that we're starting to say, wait a minute, is that really my experience of technology? Yes, it does amazing things. That's what makes it so complicated, is that it's both. It does bring amazing gifts. But does it really make my life easier? Some ways it does. Some ways it really doesn't. Do 1,000 communications in a day make me feel more connected or more lonely? There's a lot of evidence to show that the less face-to-face time in real life we have, the more lonely we feel. So all those texts and all those Facebooking togetherness things are leading us to feel more lonely, is what we're finding. Does it really make us freer? Yes, we can work remotely, but the cell phone is the Trojan horse. When it gets into your house, that means you have to work because you're available. So does it really make us feel freer, or is it the set of golden handcuffs? People are starting to see the gap between the way it's been sold and the way we're really living it. So that's an interesting thing to start to notice.
Right. Now, I know that you're not saying that you're against technology.
I love it.
Right. I mean, we all do, right. But you say, you teach us how to have a healthy relationship. So how do we establish that balance?
Well, so again, mindfulness. This is mindfulness being used properly. So again, we start with awareness. How am I using? Am I okay with that? Is the way I'm using in line with what matters to me? That is the primary. Second, catching, creating a kind of inner colander in our mind. Every time I have a thought, oh, I'm waiting on a line, I could check my email. Or, you know, I have 10 minutes till the movie starts. I could buy a set of pots online. Whatever nonsense we're doing, is this in line with the way I want to use this time? Could I spend a few moments with my own thoughts? Could I do nothing and see what nothing feels like? Then we start to implement behaviors. Maybe just not putting the phone on the table when you're meeting with a friend, right? What is that like, to actually not have that waiting for what better could come in, what else could come in? Maybe every day, I take 10 minutes off and I don't have my phone with me at all, and I see what that's like. Or when I'm eating, I don't have the phone there checking Facebook while I'm eating. I just taste the food. We start to implement behaviors.
Small baby steps.
Exactly. And if it's with our children, you know, we set aside some family time where there are no devices allowed. All these sorts of things. Then we take notice. How do we feel? Do we feel different? Do we feel just different by taking ownership, by feeling more in control? Because part of what feels so terrible in addiction is we don't feel that we're in control of our own life anymore. We're being dragged around by our addiction. So we want to take control of how are we living. And it can be very small behaviors. I have no sense of direction. I need a GPS. I need to use it for that. But at the same time, when I'm not traveling and I'm just out taking a walk, wander like a happy dog.
You don't need to take pictures
That's
of
right.
everything and post it on
That's right.
social media.
Exactly.
Now, also talking about social media, you talk about personal brand.
Yeah.
So tell us, you know, how dangerous can that concept be?
Well, you know, the branding of ourselves has become the way of life now, right? That we're constantly, again, not living our life. It used to be, for example, you played music, let's say. And then because you played music and enjoyed music, you became known as a person who played music, or a rock and roll guy, or whatever you became. The label followed the interest. So it was organic, inside out. But now what we want is we want to be known as, I'm that. And then we fill in our brand with life. So again, our relationship, not just with ourselves, where we see ourselves as a vacuum, as sort of nothing until we're known by social media. Our relationship with life is not that we're directly living it, we're using life to determine who we're seen as. Our whole relationship with life has been flipped. And it's like an exercise in narcissism. We're running around everywhere trying to show everyone who we are. This happened, therefore I'm that kind of person.
Or let me film my own YouTube videos and post them, and everybody's doing that. How to apply makeup, how to do hair, how to how to write a report. I mean, it's just really spiraling out of control, I think.
It is spiraling. And it's sort of a paradox, honestly, because on the one hand, we're imagining that every latte that we drink is fascinating, right? Not just to our mother, but to everybody. But at the same time, we experience ourselves as sort of meaningless unless we're validated by social media, unless our brand is picked up and we're seen as that brand. So it's both. We think we're the most important thing in the universe, but we kind of don't really believe that unless everyone else says it. So a lot of my clients describe, the moment they post something on social media sends them into a full panic attack until the responses, if they get 10 thumbs up, they're valid again, they matter again.
Right.
If, God forbid, they don't get liked or, it's not the response they want, they plunge into despair. And I'm not exaggerating.
No, I know.
So our brand, who we're seen as has replaced who we experience ourselves as. And what we're seeing a lot of is we're seeing that our basic values are changing, where popularity is what's valued now. It's not really mastery. It's not the long-range scholar or somebody who's really experienced. What we value, and that's why you see, the 17-year-old on Vine who can do a split or wear a funny hat is our new cultural icon. That's the new Gandhi.
Right.
Right? That's what's valued, is somehow you have something that people want to watch. It doesn't matter whether
It doesn't. Everybody's on YouTube looking at these quick little things.
That's it.
These quick little skits.
Yeah, an attention span. In 2012, we had an attention span, 2000, we had an attention span of 12.5 seconds. We now have an attention span of 8.25 seconds, which is 0.25 seconds less than a goldfish.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So right now, the idea that we are losing our ability to focus is very real. It's very, very real. At the same time, again, everything resolves in paradox. We're becoming hyper-focused, right? People say we don't focus anymore, but we're actually always focused on something. We don't know how to not have an object of our focus.
Right.
So we're terrified of the spaces in between. And this is changing. This is going to maybe kill imagination, kill creative thought, because it's in the spaces. We were talking about this earlier, where real imagination and real creativity arises.
Yeah. And peacefulness. There's that element of just being peaceful with yourself. There's nothing that can replace that.
That is the key. At the end of every spiritual tradition, philosophical tradition, psychological tradition, we come to realize that peace goes this way, that our real well-being lies within us. It is not in another. We are the person we're looking for. We are the destination. And what scares me, honestly, most about the way we're using technology is we're beginning to believe or solidify our belief that happiness exists there, outside of us. And this is a recipe for depression. This is a recipe for a chase that has no end. It's Sisyphusian. The boulder will always come back, but we're learning to look further and further away from here, where we are. And that I really want to address with the millennials and grown-ups as well.
So everyone, make sure that today you take at least, start with 3 minutes, put your phone down, and just give yourself a little chill time. Nancy, where can we find out more?
NancyColier.com, 1L. And the book is everywhere books are sold.
The Power of Off. The mindful way to stay sane in a virtual world. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.